Hello and good evening. I'm Katie Tyler and this is the Sociology Staffroom. And today I've got Stephen, an experienced sociology teacher and head of social science, talking to me all about deep dive. So I know you've been teaching for 13 years sociology, 3 years of head of department, and obviously you've gone for a deep dive. I personally haven't. I've been very close to having them, but obviously they came in the way of the sort of normal flow. I think for many schools, we know that this is potentially something that we might experience in the next year or so because of, you know, OFSTED, the big O, catching up. There's been lots of rumours about what they involve. There's been sort of like hearsay conversations about what they are and what they're not. But what I'm really grateful is I've got someone that's experienced, like yourself, Stephen, is a sociology teacher, is also head of social sciences, to talk to us about your experience. So first of all, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having us. Pleasure.
Amazing. So first of all, from the horse's mouth, what is a deep dive? Because obviously we've banded around, different chats and teachers from a friend of a friend that's got a friend that had an Ofsted and deep. What is it first of all?
So yeah, a deep dive is very much about identifying certain departments, certain academic areas, and just really drilling down into all aspects of them. So looking at the student point of view, the staff point of view, and one of the things that we thought about a little bit when we were looking at it is like levels of ladders, from the bottom all the way at the top, and if there's that kind of consistency. One of the reasons that we've chosen for a deep dive is that we're quite a large department. We've got over 500 students doing.
Yeah, I remember hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got about 500 students doing sociology, and the other departments that had a deep dive when we were Ofsted were maths and English, so quite big departments. And I think what Ofsted were trying to do was just move away from just let's say everybody within the college and see if there's a consistency in teaching. And one of the things I've noticed is that it's more of like really drilling down into the student experience and whether or not that can be seen throughout from the teaching point of view, but also the systems point of view, the recording point of view, and obviously all the way up to the top of the department as well.
Okie dokie. So what I'm taking away from that is a deep dive is, like using your words, is drilling down into a department and see that consistency across the school from the student's perspective, through the teachers, like subject teachers' point of view, and obviously into sort of heads of department, potentially senior leadership. I sort of use the sort of word that I've heard banded around, but maybe it's not right. But sort of, would it be that triangulation, so that what you're saying is happening is also true to because I know you mentioned the word consistency, but it's what's happening for the students' experience. So if you're saying, oh, the students, I don't know, really engage with oracy or something, because I know I've looked at oracy in one of the podcasts previously. They're seeing that in the lessons, they're seeing that in your planning, or if they're not seeing it in that lesson, the students at least say they do have discussions. Also, is that right in understanding that?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. They do want to see that triangulation between the intent, and that was definitely something I think needs to be spoken about. I think with the Ofsted deep dive, because ultimately we're going to say this is our intent, this is what we're planning on doing. This comes all the way from the top all the way down. But even just within our department, the intent of the sociology department is to do this. Then what they want to see is, well, is that actually being acted out in the lessons by the teachers? Do the teachers actually know what the intent is? Like physically asking them, like, what's the intent? Why are you doing this? And then ultimately, do the students know? And
Right.
or the students? I mean, I think it all falls back to one key fundamental for me: is are the students getting the best deal diet that they possibly can? And are we saying that? And do the students know about it as well?
So do they, and not in a scripted way, obviously, that's what I'm not assuming. They're going, duh, 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 is it that? I don't know.
I mean, one of the things I did was I wrote down the intent of the department, and I made sure that the teachers understood what the intent was. And it wasn't just a one-way system. We had conversations about it, like, why are we here? Why are we doing what we're doing? Why do we structure it in the way that we do? Why do we do exam skills on the day that we do exam skills? But making sure that the students knew about it, and making sure the students understood understand and could verbalize to the Ofsted inspector, why are we doing what we're doing? I don't think there's anything wrong with necessarily scripting it in a way. I wouldn't want them reading from the script, but so everyone's on the same page and understands what they're doing. And move Ofsted to one side. I think it's really beneficial for the students to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. Ultimately,
Yeah, no, I was thinking about it. First of all, before I sort of move on to well done for getting 500. I mean, I can't even imagine. It's probably the biggest. I mean, I'm sure someone's going to go and message in or whatever, say that I've got a bigger department than that. But I actually, I've never, I personally, my whole, when I think of a big department, I think, I mean, is this across GCSE and A level? Or is it
so
just at
we
A
only
level?
have So we only have 35, approximately 35 GCSEs because it's only for resits. We're a sixth form college, so
Wow.
we deal solely in A levels and
Wow.
a really small handful. So we have around about 500 students.
Wow.
So yeah, big
Honestly,
department.
I mean, maybe this is just me really naive, and I'm like, oh wow. But I mean, obviously, I've worked in a six film college before, but even then, the numbers. I'm looking, thinking back, no. And then obviously, just sixth form schools tend to be bigger. But yours is almost like a whole sixth form college on its own, by the sounds of it. I mean, it's not like it's a big task, and I can see why you want that vision. I mean, well done on that first of all, but also, I think interestingly, I suppose I've got my own biases about everything, and everyone has inherited biases. But actually, weirdly, when I started looking at it myself as a subject teacher and as a head of department, it really made me think about why I was doing stuff. Like who am I doing this for and why am I doing it? And actually, that was quite interesting because then I saw the value added in stuff and also the opposite of that and thought, well, actually, that's offering absolutely no value. And that's just to make your lesson look exciting or interesting. And actually, there is no purpose. So it's equally about sort of cutting stuff out as well as keeping stuff in. And also treating students like young adults. So they're involved in that whole process. So definitely. So this was sort of nicely links into my sort of next question, really, is what can teachers, and I suppose there's two parts to the question, what can heads of department do? And I suppose one of those is making a clarity of the intent of what you've said, and then feeding that down to the subject teachers, which then would, I assume, trickle that down to the students. Is there anything else, as a head department initially, and then maybe as a subject teachers, what we should be doing prior to a deep dive, other than just making that intent clear? Because I'm sure we've all written a text, because that's probably something we've been asked to do, but probably not with that really at the front of our minds. I kind of know I've written one. I'm thinking, what actually have I written? Because I wrote that as a thing to do, as a thing because I was told to do it, rather than like fully embodied it, if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense. And I think some of the times, teachers, heads of department, we do things because we've been told to do them and they're a ticky box sometimes. And I echo what you were saying before about how it actually helps you reflect a little bit on why we're doing certain things. And doing this intent, we deliberately wrote a new one just when we knew Ofsted were imminent. We knew we were going to be seen because we were part of a bigger organisation which was requiring improvement, and so we knew we were going to be seen. So we wrote a new intent, but actually really making sure that we meant it.
Mm.
A lot of people get worried about Ofsted coming in. I've been through, I think this was my sixth Ofsted that I've been through as a teacher or head of department.
Mm.
And I've never really get phased by it because I know that everything that they say and I tell them, like I genuinely mean it, and it's the truth, because you'll get found out otherwise. So that's one of the ways that we looked at the intent, was like, really, what is it that we're trying to achieve? Let's not tell them we're going to be doing things that we shouldn't be doing. And actually, I seen that there was a bit of a weight lifted off the shoulders of the staff and the teachers and the team, because they understood that, well, as long as we just do our job, that the job that we do every day, that lives up to this intent and there's a purpose behind it, then we haven't got as much to fear. Obviously, that inspector walking into your classroom is always going to just get the heart racing a little
Mm.
bit faster. But ultimately, knowing that what we do isn't a lie,
Mm.
it's real, it's what we do on a daily basis. And we've, we all know those students who turn around and say, oh, such and such a teacher changes when an Ofsted inspector comes in or when they're being observed. And I just wanted to remove that completely from the team. Look, we don't need to do special lessons. We don't need bells and whistles or anything like that. What we need to do is just demonstrate to the Ofsted inspector that what we do on a daily basis is it's meaningful for the students, and the students can articulate that as in this is the reason why we're doing it. So I would definitely say to heads of department, people who are going to be involved in that, just make sure that what you're doing with your intent, but also in your lessons that week and any conversations that you have, that you're just honest and it's truthful to what you would do on a daily basis.
So a couple of things that you've just said that are really interesting there is that idea of, yes, the intent is not just something that you just got to do. And I think, like, for me as a, you know, looking at sociology particularly, would be to go back and think, well, actually, when I wrote that intent, what frame of mind was it? Something that I was doing because I knew there was a deadline? And actually now I've sort of been teaching for, another, because things are very different. We were sort of writing them, a lot of us were doing Ofsted as well, not Ofsted, pandemic, which obviously is slightly different, but actually now re-looking at those and that honesty, because ultimately if you're going to, like you said, you're just going to get found out anyhow. It's not going to be something that's going to be true or real. And really, I mean, I said at the beginning, is it the case of it head of department down to subject teachers, down to students? But really, it's really the other way up, isn't it? Because if you're putting, this is being idealistic, but actually what you do is for the students and their learning and their experience. So actually it's that that's dictating your intent, and you doing what's really meaningful. I think you said it earlier, to those students, you get, I think you said the best deal. I think that's the words you said. Are they getting the best deal? And actually, it's maybe not looking at it from what you want, it's what the kids deserve, what the students in front of you deserve, rather than going, oh, this is what I'd like to do, and I look at this and I look at this, or whatever. It's actually, these are the students in front of me, this is the ability they're at, this is where they're coming from, these experiences they've had. Actually, am I doing what I'm saying I'm going to do for them? So maybe, is that right, looking at it from that point of view?
I think that's a really good position to look at it from. One of the questions that we ask, we're kind of moving aside, I suppose, from Ofsted a little bit, but just as teachers or heads of department, is if that was my son or daughter, are they getting the best deal that they possibly can, from every lesson, from every assessment, from the amount of work that we're doing. It's not about overworking people. It's about doing the job that we're paid to do, ultimately. And I think if you look at it from that aspect, now, one of the things we were talking about there about the size of our department, we are an inner city sixth form. We do get a lot of students who come to us who have been rejected from their school sixth forms. We're very inclusive. As long as they get fours and fives in their subjects, then they can come and study with us. And with that comes that responsibility to know that there's a different intent. It's about those life skills. You've mentioned oracy. It's about developing those life skills. All of those things have to go into the intent, I think. And if you are to write it from a top-down approach, I think it might be a little bit too, I suppose, idealistic in terms of this is what I would like to happen, and every student is going to do this. But that's just not the case, is it? You've got to look at it from the student point of view. What is it that they need, and how are we going to deliver that? And at the end, what is it that they're going to achieve at the end? Because value added, we get students who come through with their value added would be a C, and like some people would say, well, that's not really value added, but for the students that we have, that is. And the intent for that student is going to be different to the intent for a student whose value added is A star.
Definitely, and it's knowing who's in front of you, isn't it? Rather than sort of, I don't know, taking one, like, I know that we are a community of sharing. I know that, like, obviously in Facebook people share lots of ideas, but actually that intent, that sort of those three I's are written from those students that are in front of them, and that might not be applicable to your students as well. So it's really, really important. Are there any other things other than, obviously we talked a lot about the intent, and obviously I assume that's the implication as well, that how we actually implement that intent, like it's all well and good saying we're going to do this, but if we're not doing that actually in the classroom and the students aren't seeing that as well, then obviously that's not that consistency you spoke about. Are there any other things that we sort of need to get into place, not just for Ofsted, because obviously I don't, Ofsted will come and go, and their sort of criteria will change potentially over time. But with this being in mind that this is helping the students, is there anything in preparation that we could be doing in regards to sort of the deep dives, other than obviously making sure our intent's clear and that we're sort of implementing it effectively and appropriately?
Yeah, I think systems were quite a big thing with our deep dive. So our day, our inspection was split into 2 days. Luckily, she was only like with me for 2 days. I think she was quite happy after the second day, and she didn't need to come back. First day was very much about seeing in the classroom kind of things. The second day was really interesting, and this goes back to what I was saying about like the learner diet and how it's differentiated, individualized. Wanting to look at systems. So they wanted to look at like attendance, for example, and picked out a student with say 70% attendance and wanted to know, well, what systems are in place to support that student. So really looked at our kind of our trackers. What grades is that student getting, and made comparisons between that student and a student getting 95% attendance, really high grades. um, I think having systems and robust systems with accurate data, which is honest as well. I mean, we had students actually looked at who had 60% attendance, who were failing formal assessments regularly, were really struggling, and I think all that they were really interested in seeing was what are we doing for that student. So how much
Yeah.
intervention is there? How much tracking is there? How many notes are on the system for that student? And it should be kind of the diet should marry up, so to speak. So whereas if you had a student with 90% attendance, then they're not expecting to see loads of notes on about, oh, must attend, catch up, or really concerned about the student, etc., etc. Having an appropriate amount of information on our systems for the student based on who that student is. Then they went back and they wanted to see or speak to some of those students, ideally, again, to triangulate, to marry up what I'm saying we're doing, what the system's saying we're doing, and then what this student is actually doing. I think that's a really important area that people need to be thinking about, at least, is, are our systems strong enough to give us the data to back up what we're saying we're doing, but also isn't just a load of lies and telling them everything's rosy. Our inspector was really happy with the fact that we had some students who just were not achieving and they were struggling, but there was an appropriate amount of support that was driven by the data for that student.
Goes back to, I suppose, the honesty, isn't it? Like you said, it's all well and good having the systems in place, but if the systems are just a system and actually you're not doing anything with those systems, so you're saying that, I don't know, after if students hit X amount of attendance percentage, you're doing catch up on a Thursday, but actually that's not happening, and you ask the students, are you going to catch up? Or even if they're, I suppose, not attending catch up, it's them, well, what do you do after that? So I suppose, again, go back to that triangulation. Are those systems and those intent actually falling down on those students? Because it feels like it's moving away from, is this like right, sort of like back in the day where it was sort of like the magical sort of OFSTED lesson they go in and it's fantastic. Actually, it's looking, like you said right at the beginning, it's deeper than that, that if the students are saying this is happening, or you're saying this, are the students actually receiving that? And if they don't attend, is that being followed up? Are they being, and I suppose from not just an academic sense, but also like a sort of well-being sense as well. I suppose that marries into SEN as well, pupil premium, and knowing those students, and they're not just a student, that you're aware of their backstory as well. So it sounds like there's a lot of
No,
clarity in knowing who your students are. Is that right in me understanding that?
yeah, I think so. That was probably one of my key takeaways, was know your students. So I had to know them from a department viewpoint, and the teachers had to know them from their point. The students had to know as well. So when they were in class, the inspector was going around saying, so what grade are you currently working at? How do you know you're currently working at? And then they were saying, well, can you show me? So then the student would go and get their assessment book and bring it over and show them the trackers. Um, just know the students, because I think the inspector was really trying to become the student, to put themselves into this place of that student to understand what is it like to be a student at this sixth form studying sociology. So if I'm a 60% attendance student and I've got maybe mental health issues, anxieties, things stopping me from going into lessons, what's my life like? What experience am I getting? What support am I getting? And we need to know the students. We need to know what progress they're making. But ultimately, I think possibly more importantly, the students need to know that information. So, when you're doing your walk around the classroom, when they're doing an activity, occasionally ask them, so how are you performing? What grade are you getting? What did you get in your last assessment? And it starts feeding into their heads a little bit. The students are right, okay, I need to know what it is I'm doing. Because when Ofsted come in, they will ask the student, and luckily we drill it into the students. We do weekly knowledge tests where they're having to fill out a tracker, and they can really think about what it is that they're doing, but also where they're at in the whole process of
And
achieving.
where they need to improve as well, I'd assume. So it's not just about, because again, I'm sort of
Yeah,
trying to put the head on of not like doing things just because there's a deep dive. I mean, again, go back to that sort of importance of the students, that actually if they know, because ultimately they're there to learn, and they could potentially be studying somewhere else or doing something completely different, or an apprenticeship. So if they're going to spend 2 years at college or sixth form taking sociology for argument's sake, they really, really need to know not only what grade they've got, but also how they're going to improve, because obviously they're taking autonomy for their learning, and also I suppose making teachers accountable for that as well. So it's like you said, putting that, the Ofsted inspector was really putting themselves in a student's shoes. So if you are that 60% student, what support are you getting? What support should you be getting as well? And giving them a voice maybe to say, well, hang on a minute, this is what I'm supposed to be getting. And this is what I need to work on as well. Is that right? I'm just
yeah.
really trying to get a
Oh,
full
yeah.
picture of it in my head. Like, yeah.
No, definitely. I think exactly what you've said. I think you could sit down, you can think about that student coming on the first day of September all the way through until exam day, and what does the thread look like? What are they doing? Do the students know what they're doing? So, I mean, everyone, people who've been involved in Ofsted before or anything like that, the sequencing, um, the sequencing of the 2 years though as well. So really trying to get an understanding. I think that links back to the intent as well, and I would put the sequencing within the intent. What is it we're doing? And then the implementation side of things. So when are we doing it? Why are we doing it then? So, this wasn't asked of me, but I know this was asked of another department that I had deep dive. And so, why are you studying this book of poetry now? So I was thinking about that from a sociology point of view. If you get someone who's a bit of a nous about sociology or an expert in sociology, they might turn around and say, so when do you do research methods? Why do you do it then? I think it would be useful if heads of department and the team knew why they were doing it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with maybe the students knowing that as well,
Well, yeah, because
because they're going to be asked.
yeah, and not just because they're going to be asked. I suppose for them, they need to
True.
know like why things are happening when, in order to understand their learning. So, like, it makes me think about something that I said to the students today. I actually don't, obviously, different examples give you schemes work. I don't necessarily follow that completely that sequence, because it doesn't. For me, sociology is very much spiral learning if it's repeated. And I said to the students, we're now at part of a course where actually everything's going to feel like repetition. And the reason we do that is because sociology is synoptic. So we've already looked at policies, but we look at policies again when we look at differential achievement. And I think actually then the students know that you're not just like they're probably sitting there thinking, why are we doing this all again? We've just looked at this. And if you just say, well, actually everything's interlinked, and you'll see this when we move on to like criminal, we'll look at policies again, and we'll probably look at education. So I suppose it's having that, I suppose what goes on in the teacher's head, that narrative. So the students aren't thinking, why are we doing this? I'm sure we did this last lesson, sort of thing. I suppose it's keeping them on that journey. Because I was thinking about my own experience as a student. I never really knew why I was learning anything when. Like, like talking about whereas I think that's what's changed now. Like, you just sat there passively and you really didn't know what was happening next lesson or lesson next after that. And you really didn't know what the end goal was. Whereas actually, I suppose you could say at the induction week, our end goal is to look, I don't know, those core debates is, for me, that's what it all comes down to: consensus versus conflict, structure versus action. And we're looking at how far that exists in all of those things, those institutions in education and family, etc. But yeah, it keeps it quite holistic, I suppose, the learning
Yeah,
experience.
but I think if as long as you can articulate the reason why you're doing
Mm,
that through your intent, that the teachers could say with confidence why that's happening. I
mm,
think I think they would be quite pragmatic about it, that the students probably wouldn't know the ins and outs of what, like, all of
mm,
those things that you've just talked about. But um, I think it's important that they would understand certain aspects of it. I don't think the inspector would ever turn around and say, well, why are you doing research methods now? I think that would be a question that the head of department or the teacher could easily be asked, though, about that, the whole sequencing and what you're planning. Um, there wasn't a massive amount, I'll be honest with you, when we were inspected, around about the the core elements, I suppose, of what we do. Um, One thing that might be quite useful to know would be around talking about, well, you're quite exams focused, and exams, there was a clear link to exams. And going back to the honesty thing I was talking about before, I just said to the inspector, honestly, we've got around about 90 subtopics that we've got to teach in 2 years, and there's 3 exams at the end of them where the students have just got to do really well in it. We do teach them debates, we do oracy, we have conversations, but ultimately there is that link. And as long as you're honest and you understand, like you're saying why you do something, and you can really back it up with a confidence. Well, we were okay in our Ofsted. Maybe it's just because of the inspector that we had, I don't know. But she came away really, like, confident with what we were saying, and why we were doing it.
mm. The word that keeps coming into my head as you're talking is integrity. That's the word. Like that's what comes from you, and I think that's maybe, we're not doing it. I think it goes back to the first thing you said, which is who are we doing it for, and it's for the students. And yes, it so happens that Ofsted are coming in and expecting that, and maybe Ofsted has moved to sort of that idea of the student experience, that diet, that triangulation. But what I'm hearing from you, or what I'm sensing, is that sense of integrity, and you can't argue that, can you? You can't. You can't. Where do you go when you're being honest and genuine? Like there's nothing you can do. I think as soon as it starts unraveling, it's where you're not having any of those things, and actually like you said, go back to that student that got 60%. It's good that like say if that student's got 60% attendance and they're underachieving or whatever that might be, it's knowing that. The worst thing is you don't know it and it goes under the radar and you're like, oh, like I didn't. Whereas if you're aware of it, okay, and you've tried everything, the student's still underachieving, it's that knowledge in that, rather than going, the Ofsted inspector is highlighting it to you, because it's a bit like that thing with parents' evening, isn't it? Where how can the parents support you if you're the first time telling them that their child is underachieving, but you've waited to a parents' evening to be told? You don't really want to be waiting to an Ofsted inspection to be sort of highlighting the fact that a student's underachieving potentially. Yeah.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And obviously, if I'm reiterating myself, I apologize, but I think it is a really important message that you just do what you do, and do what you do well. Don't, because if they see that little thread of doubt, they're just going to pull it, and it's going to unravel, and people will get found out. And we've all been observed before, or seen observations where it's not going particularly well, and it starts getting worse and worse and worse. The Ofsted's exactly the same, and it's not just the observation element of it. It's like if you're sitting down having a conversation with them, they know that the professionals, they know when something's not quite right. Um, some people might say it was a bit silly pushing a student with 60% attendance towards an Ofsted inspector, but I was confident that we everything that we had was there. It was honest. There was we weren't hiding anything.
Mm,
Yeah, we always want the Ofsted inspectors to see the A-star students who've got 99, 100% attendance. And gone are the days, though, where we can send kids away for a week, just have a week off while Ofsted are in, because it'll be picked up still
mm.
somehow.
They should, and it should be, shouldn't it? Like off rolling, and it has to be picked up, because ultimately, like you go again, going back to something you said earlier, was actually two things that sort of keep on drumming in my head is your integrity, but also remembering those that could be. What would you want from your own children? Like, if you've got children, or if you're an aunt or an uncle, whatever, is like, would you want that experience, or even for yourself? Like if you were that 14 or 15-year-old who's doing GCSEs, or A-level students 17, 18 years old. What diet, what experience do you want? So yeah, there's so much from this. I think the last thing I'm sort of going to end on here is just one question for you: is there anything you would do differently now in hindsight? Because hindsight's a beautiful thing. Is there anything you would change from your experience or add to your experience in preparation for the deep dive?
It's an interesting question. The honest answer is no. Um, Mainly because I always approach Ofsted in terms of they are just humans. They're here to do the job. They've got the best interests of the students. They're not here to catch us out, or find fault in us. They're just following a thread and seeing where it takes them. And if they're happy at the end of it, then we've got nothing to worry about. The experience of some of the other departments was different. I would definitely say be prepared for a lot of book scrutiny. So the maths department, for example, they basically said, I would like the entire class's books and we're going to look through them. And this was an Ofsted inspector who was a maths ex maths teacher, so knew what they were talking about, knew what they were looking for. So just be prepared for that, I would say. I don't like using the word luck, but we were in a position that our deep dive went really, really well. I think we got a very fair inspector, and I was prepared to the nth degree, because I hate being unprepared, and I don't want someone saying something to me that puts me on the back foot, because then that's when I start unraveling as well. Just the preparation, know your students. That is the key thing. Really know your students, know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and make sure that the students know that. I would say they were the key things that any teacher or head of department can really take away from that.
Amazing, thank you, and thank you for your sharing it. Because obviously, I appreciate that. It's a November cold evening, and it's 7 o'clock at night that we're recording this. And obviously, you've got 500 students, and I assume just as a lot of big department of staff as well to sort of coordinate as well. So thank you for your time, and really great to hear. Actually, it's not as scary as we might think, and actually, as they say, honesty is the best policy.
It is 100%. But well, thanks for having us on. It's been really fun to talk to you. Hopefully, it's been
Thank you.
useful.
Oh, it's been definitely for me personally as well, and I'm sure it'll be for other teachers as well. So thank you ever so much, and you take care. And all the best for the rest of the academic year.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Stephen.